Hello, Laziali all over the world. Welcome to another episode of Lazio Lounge. I'm Vittorio Campanile. With me, Alistair McKenzie, who finally went out today. Alistair, what is it, the feeling to finally be able to leave the house and have a cappuccino?
Yeah, I mean, well, for the last couple of weeks, we've kind of been allowed out a little bit more to go for runs and things like that. But today they properly opened, threw open the doors, and we've got bars open, restaurants open. Yeah, so it's pretty much almost like normal life, and it's amazing how liberating it can feel to have your coffee in a cup instead of in a plastic container, and have a beer in an actual glass again. The small things in life, Vittorio, I'm really appreciating right now.
Yeah, you forgot the importance of these little things, right? A cappuccino, even though you should be now able to do a cappuccino at home, Alistair. Come on.
I know, and actually, my girlfriend bought a kind of frother extension to her kind of mixing thing, and it was one of my kind of quarantine jobs, and I just never got around to actually bothering trying to learn how to make one. So yeah,
you didn't
it was
even try that?
Yeah, too lazy. I'm sorry.
You cannot say you didn't have time. At least this, right?
My time was spent putting together excellent podcasts. That's all it's been.
Okay. So you had other podcasts with other show, not with us. Okay, good to know. Anyway, today we are going to talk about an argument that a lot of Lazio fans are really interested in, because I think the first time Claudio Lotito spoke about that was like 15 years ago, when he announced the project of the Stadio delle Aquile, how he called it, the Lazio Stadium. And unfortunately, from, what was it, 2005, something like that, we didn't have any good news about it. And last year, it looks like Roma was able to start the works for the new stadium. And suddenly Lotito said, well, if they start, then we're going to be next. And unfortunately, the plan of Roma Stadio got blocked, and the Lazio one didn't even see the light. So it's a big shame, Alistair, because it's so important to have your own stadium, especially in Italian football, where not a lot of other teams have it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's all sorts of layers to this. It is one of the biggest talking points, I think, in Italian football as a whole, to be honest, let alone Lazio. But I think the Lazio Stadium project is particularly kind of mysterious to people because, number one, it's been very much in the shadow of the Roma project for the last few years, while they've been desperately trying to get that off the ground. And number two, we've had the theory of it floating around, like you say, for 15 years now, which is an incredible amount of time to have a kind of, well, as the club have claimed, a project ready to go and not have made any sort of progress whatsoever. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good opportunity for us to get into a bit of the detail as to why that has happened and where we are now. Which, yeah, isn't necessarily that much further along than we were last year.
Yeah, we can wrap it up here. Guys, no news. I'm sorry. Good night, everybody. Well, the thing is, Claudio Lotito talked about this plan 15 years ago. We know that he presented a plan the first time and was rejected because the land that was owned by Claudio Lotito were considered a land in risk for flooding and things like that. So that's why the project didn't get authorized from the mayor of Rome. Since then, nothing happened. And Claudio Lotito pretty much said, this is my project. I want to get approved there. I won't do nothing. I will wait Roma to do the hard work to get all the approval. And when they will get the approval, then I will knock on the door and say, hey, don't forget about the other team of Rome. Here we are with a plan ready to go. We're waiting just your approval. This is a sort of resume of the 15 years so far, I think, Alistair.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I suppose that this kind of popped up again last year was that like you say, Roma looked to be at the time getting the green light to actually get their stadium up and running. That didn't end up happening. I think it was the public interest vote that went against them. They've had all sorts of problems, and it goes to show really how complicated the red tape in Italy is for building projects on this scale, and that has been very disruptive for them. I think it's taken them about, 3 or 4 years now. It was one of Pallotta's big goals when he first stepped into Roma as their president, was to make sure this was part of his legacy, and now he's looking to sell the club, having essentially given up on the idea of it actually being possible. So it's not an easy thing to do. Those comments were quite interesting, I think, last year, because Diaconale came out at the time and said that he wanted the two clubs should walk at the same pace, was his quote, and essentially started talking about equal treatment and the fact that because Lazio have their own project, as well as Roma, essentially if they waited for Roma to be able to hurdle these obstacles and get a stadium project moving, Lazio should be able to hurdle the same obstacles in the same way.
Let's start and say something. At the moment, of the big clubs, only Juventus has their own stadium. Because yes, Sassuolo has the stadium, Frosinone has the stadium, Udinese has the stadium. But in big city, big clubs, only Juventus have the stadium. And if you don't know it, the only reason why Juventus have the stadium is because they bought an old stadium, they destroyed and built up the new stadium. So they, in a certain way, they avoid the rule. Because, as we were saying before, unfortunately, Italian rules are very complicated, and to build a new stadium is so difficult in Italy that the only way why Juventus was able to do it is because of that. They had an old stadium, they destroyed it and built it up, and so avoided all those regulations and things like that. So this is why Juventus has the stadium of the property, and we saw in the last, since the stadium has been built, that the revenue of Juventus have grown massively. Because the big difference is that, obviously, it's a new stadium, so it's much better, this new stadium than the old one. Let's not forget that, to give you a context, last time there have been works on the Olimpico was 1990 for the World Cup. So we are talking about 30 years ago. So it's very old stadium. They're open just one day a week. So the match day, Roma and Lazio pay a fee every year, a rent, let's call it like that, for the stadium. So they're not using that much the stadium, while Juventus have built cinema, museum, hotels, all there, and it's open 7 days a week, so they can make money every day. And the revenue from the matches have grown because obviously the stadium is much better. You enjoy much more the match. And before you can go and take a beer there, etc., etc. So this is, I'm not saying, and this is important, you don't have to think, okay, Lazio built the new stadium, suddenly we are the new Real Madrid, because it's not that. But obviously, it's increase of revenue for Lazio that will help them become a better team. So that's why Lazio has to build a stadium. Second point, Alistair, is that Milan and Inter are finalizing the plan for a new stadium. Fiorentina, Commisso, when he arrived, is working out to build a new stadium. If Lazio doesn't build a new stadium, it will be the last big team to don't have an own stadium, and this will be a big disadvantage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the benefits of owning your own grounds, I mean, should be fairly self-explanatory. And it is amazing that in this day and age, so many of the big Italian teams still don't, like you say. Lotito's vision when he first bought the ground that he wants to build the stadium on was to have a facility, I suppose, rather than just a stadium that was, open 24 hours a day, that had commercial center. Basically, like you say, goes beyond the match. The fact that people would be drawn there every day of the week for different reasons, and also obviously you have a lot more control over what your possibilities are, the stadium tours or the club museum or whatever you want to do. At the moment, it's a big disappointment to many fans. I remember this very vividly. When I was 14 years old, I came to Rome for the first time on holiday with my parents. I forced them to take me out to the Stadio Olimpico so I could have a look at the Lazio stadium, which, if you've not been to Rome before, isn't exactly a convenient place to get to as a tourist. And yeah, we got there, and there's nothing really to do. You know, it's an impressive kind of facility around the Foro Italico and so on, but you can't get in. You can't really get near the stadium. There's no tours. There's nothing you can do. So as a fan, the stadium gives you nothing. So yeah, I mean, obviously, it's not something Lazio want to get left behind on. On top of that, Lotito said recently that the Olimpico rent they're paying is €4 million a year. There is a big argument in Italy that part of the reason that attendances have been low is the low quality of stadiums. People aren't necessarily drawn to grounds if they go there and they don't really get anything apart from a crap view of the pitch, because you've got a running track around it, you're miles away, crap food, crap drink, uncomfortable seat, whatever it is. I don't think the Olimpico's too bad on those points, but you can understand it. So yeah, it's stating the obvious. The key problem is, like you say, that Lazio, Lotito, more importantly, doesn't want to do a regeneration project. He's not interested in doing a reconstruction of an existing sporting facility. It would be far, far easier for Lazio, from my understanding, to get this done if they were willing to do that. And this is the big reason that the name we see coming up time and again is the Stadio Flaminio. If people aren't aware of the Stadio Flaminio as the home to the national rugby team up until 2011, then it got shut down in 2011. Now you can go past it and it's just basically got weeds growing out of it, and it's just been left completely empty. And you know, there's been all these various points where whether it's Virginia Raggi, who's the mayor of Rome, or other people within the kind of Rome Council have essentially kind of pleaded with Lotito to try and do that, to try and make the Flaminio the new home of Lazio, but he's not interested. He doesn't think it's big enough. He doesn't think it's the kind of got the potential to be the kind of site that he wants it to be. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Flaminio is in an amazing location, very close to Piazza del Popolo, you know, central location, but yeah, this is essentially the crux, is that it seems to me, Vittorio, that what the city wants, what the councillors want, is for Lazio to make that their stadium, and Lotito has no interest in doing that, and that is essentially the reason why nothing is happening.
I have to tell you that I would love to see Lazio getting the Stadio Flaminio, because there are great memories. It's in the center of Rome, really in the center. It would be so easy to get there, but there are huge problems. Let's not forget that another incredible rules of Italy, the Stadio Flaminio is considered an art, so you can modify it, but not that much. So obviously the stadio has to be rebuilt, but you have to respect some laws. And so this means that the stadium will be very small, that the biggest problem is it won't be able to put the coverage on top. So you will have a brand new stadium, but if it rains, everybody will
no roof.
So, and then there is the problem, where do you do the parking, because it's close to other houses, etc. So I would love to see the Stadio Flaminio to Lazio, but it's pretty impossible to see it realized. The other problem, Alistair, is that we are talking about a stadium to be lived 7 days a week, but the plan of both Lazio and Roma, to be honest, is to build a stadium outside the city, because yes, it's still Rome, but it's far away from the center. And so my question is, if Lazio is playing on Sunday, why should you go to the Stadio delle Aquile on Tuesday, that it takes you 2 hours by car to get there, when you can go wherever else you want? You know, how many fans would be so crazy to go there? So one of the things is, yeah, it's your land, but do it inside the city. That would be much better for you, for the fans, for everybody. So the Stadio Flaminio, it's quite difficult. It's quite impossible to use it. Maybe the Stadio Olimpico could be an option there, but the plan of doing to the Stadio delle Aquile far there, it's quite complicated. The other thing, Alistair, is last year there have been some rumors because the Stadio della Roma, it looks done, and some of the Lazio fans said, Virginia Raggi looks like a Roma fan, it's not very close to Lazio, etc. So she did an interview with Radio 6, that is the radio close to Lazio, and Iaconale joined that interview and said, we want to present the plan for the stadium, etc. Why don't you come to the Formello Center and we will present the stadium plan? And Virginia Raggi said, yes, of course, let's do it, etc. So everybody was pumped up because finally the project could be presented. And instead, nothing happened. The stadium wasn't presented. Virginia Raggi still has to come to Formello, and nothing. So I'm very disappointed, because when you say something in public, in a in a radio show, and don't do nothing afterwards, well, that's disappointing.
Yeah, absolutely, and that was kind of the moment I suppose people were waiting for. Like you said, like that was supposed to be the moment that we did get some sort of breakthrough, some sort of news. And yeah, I mean, it was almost forgotten about. I mean, I saw, when Lazio went to the Campidoglio last summer after winning the Coppa Italia, and they were greeted there by Raggi and so on, and the reports around that were that Lotito had a kind of private audience with her where it was discussed, and that was supposed to therefore lead to something happening next. But we're still waiting on something happening next. And I think given the issues of the stadium rebuild issues, the land that Lotito has bought, the problems with the Stadio della Roma, it's to be honest quite hard to see what happens next. There has to be some sort of leeway given on one side, and neither of the parties appear to be very willing to give any leeway. You're dealing with two quite stubborn bodies in Virginia Raggi and Claudio Lotito. So I have to say, I mean, the idea of it sounds lovely, and the pictures that have been mocked up over the years of what a new stadium would look like, and it all looks very exciting. But until these fundamental kind of logistical obstacles, or they find a way of getting past them, it's just there's no way anything's going to happen, unfortunately.
And then there is the other problem, because building a stadium is not cheap. So both parties will have to invest a lot of money. So the other question is, where will Lotito get that money out to build a stadium? We remember a couple of years ago, Arsenal, when they built the new stadium, they spent couple of transfer market pretty much not doing nothing, because they didn't have the money to spend on players. So that's another important thing. I remember at the times they were talking about Puma, that at the time was sponsor of Lazio, that would put some money for the stadium, and the stadium could have been called Puma Stadium. But now Puma is gone, and I don't think Macron has the money to spend on a stadium.
It's going to be the Stadio Lotito, isn't it? No, absolutely. And well, to be honest, that brings us on quite nicely to the, well, I was going to say the news this week. It's not quite this week's news, but there is an interesting development going on at the moment in terms of potential ways that stadium projects in Italy could be fast-tracked to a certain extent, which is that CVC, who are a private equity firm from the UK, are looking at investing in Serie A and putting money towards stadium projects. So Vittorio, I know you've been on top of this, so do you want to explain exactly what that involvement could mean?
Yeah, well, CVC Capital Partners have been investing in sports, I think, all the time. They have been involved in rugby. I don't know if you know about it, Formula One, etc. And in the last couple of months, they were involved in Serie A. They start a meeting with Serie A because, firstly, they wanted to build a society that would be owner of the TV rights of Serie A. So they want to have a 20% stake of this company that would be owner of the rights for Serie A. So there is the option to build a Serie A channel and to sell the rights abroad. So CVC wants to invest £2 billion in this. And so if you think that they want 20% of the company, you can imagine how much it's valued the company. And they're talking with Serie A. But apart from this, they have been talking in the last week with Serie A about another project, doing another company, and this company will build the stadiums of the football team. So basically, this company, in joint venture with Serie A, will build the stadium of the team, and I presume doing some share revenue. So Lazio, the CVC company, builds the Stadio delle Aquile, and obviously they will put the money, and they will get a part of revenue share, I don't know, from ticket sales or other revenue, etc. This would be very important because, as we said, all the clubs need new stadium, and this could help getting the money because CVC Capital Partners has a lot of money, knows a lot of important clubs, owners, etc., and they can help avoiding the problems with the Italian law. So, you know, Milan and Inter are planning of building a new stadium. This could be really a game changer if it goes through. Now, CVC and Serie A has discussion till June. CVC has this rights to discuss exclusively with Serie A till June. So they have a couple of weeks to find an agreement. It would be really interesting because TV rights is something, but stadium can be really, really a completely different thing. So it would be very interesting, especially for Lazio.
Yeah, definitely. And you're right. It's a really interesting side to this deal, which to begin with was reported mostly as just being the TV rights side of it, because the current deal is up next year. But yeah, I mean, the encouraging thing is, like you say, they have the money. I mean, these guys are heavily investing in sports across the board and are not short of a penny or two. And it's kind of in everyone's interest to make this work, because if you think of their main interest being the TV rights, I think also in the negotiations the report said that they were looking at getting the commercial rights to the league and the international copyright or something along those lines. Essentially, it's within CVC's rights to make Serie A as attractive a league as it possibly can be, and hopefully a league that competes with the likes of the Premier League and Bundesliga in terms of what it can be as a TV spectacle. I think something we can all agree on, even as diehard Serie A fans, is that Serie A isn't always the best TV spectacle because of the stadiums, because of the lack of fans in many of them, but also because of the fact that it doesn't look as good when you have stands that are miles away from the pitch. The atmosphere kind of bleeds out of it a bit. We know that the atmosphere is fantastic when you're at a ground and live in the stadium, but not so much when you're looking at it on the TV. So it's kind of in everyone's interest to put this money to the best use, because the more stadiums they build, the better the league is going to be as a whole. You know, the better it's going to look, the better the clubs are going to be, the more money everyone is going to have. So it's quite an exciting looking deal. But the only thing that, and the first thing really that comes to mind for me, Vittorio, is just is it too good to be true? You know, what's the catch here?
Well, obviously, they're going to try to find a deal to make money as well. So I was thinking a sort of revenue share. So, you know, we talk about restaurant, shopping center, etc. Probably they will sell part of those shopping center spaces, etc., to make out the money out of it. Or maybe they're gonna resell it to the clubs, make a rent for the club, or buy out clause for the club. So they build the stadium, they loan it to you for 10 years, and after 10 years you pay it back. I don't know, something like that. Obviously, they are not, they're a equity company, so they are built to make money, so they won't.
It's not a charity, yeah.
No, I don't think it's a charity. And Alistair, the other funny thing is that, as we said, this is a deal they're talking with Serie A, and about this part of the deal, they are talking with 4 clubs, and these clubs are Juventus, Lazio, Napoli, and Atalanta. So if they found a deal with these 4 clubs, then they're going to send it to the others and sign the deal with Serie A. So Lotito will be directly involved in this, and it's going to be curious because it's not easy to make a deal, strike a deal with Claudio Lotito.
Well, this is the thing, and I think it's just generally not easy to make these kind of deals with Italian football or with Serie A as a whole. I mean, we've seen already, we'll get onto this a bit later, just the amount of kind of infighting that can break out when decisions are needing to be made. So I do hope that, it does, the encouraging thing is it does appear to be in everyone's best interest, I suppose. I mean, perhaps Juventus aren't quite as taken by the idea of the stadium fund because they've already done that, so they don't really get anything out of that. But if you look at Napoli, Lazio, Atalanta, you've got 3 teams there that are either looking to or have already started renovating their grounds or getting new projects underway. So, yeah, I mean, if you think of some of the stadiums in Italy, I mean, the Stadio San Paolo in Napoli is, to be honest, a bit of a disgrace. I mean, yeah. I went there just before the lockdown to cover the Barcelona game in the Champions League, and I had to pick up my press accreditation from what looked like a bomb shelter from the war, with a tiny hole about this kind of size, about a foot square, and there was a pile of vomit in the corner beside where I picked it up from. I'm not exaggerating. It is actually, it's just not what you expect from a Champions League night. And to be honest, they have done up the actual interior of it. It looks a lot nicer than it did, but there are all sorts of crumbling grounds around the country because, like you said about the Olimpico, Italia 90 was when these big building projects were underway, and that goes for across the whole country. But since then, they've been neglected really for 30 years, a lot of them. So, it couldn't really come at a better time. I think Serie A is improving as a league, as a product, as a brand, in its popularity across the board. It is going in the right direction, I think. But this would be a bit of a game changer.
Well, as the stadium are property in most of the time of the city, we know that all Italian cities are struggling and trying to save costs. So repairing or improving the stadium is the last thing they think about. So this is why San Paolo is falling down. This is why Stadio Olimpico is not in great shape. This is why Inter and Milan are thinking about building their own stadium. Fiorentina as well, The only positive thing is that the Stadio Olimpico is not about of the mayor of Rome, but it's about is of the FIGC. So they have a little bit Anziconi. So they have a little bit of interest in that. But San Paolo is falling apart, and Napoli hasn't got the money to refurbish it. So this is one of the problems. Palermo is not close to Serie A, but as well they have a huge stadium, and last time they did something was in the 90s, and since then Italy didn't have a sport competition. So this is why nothing has been done, and it's 30 years. It's time to. How many things have changed in 30 years? Bayern Munich have completely redone the stadium. Paris Saint-Germain have redone the stadium. A lot of big clubs, Barcelona and Real Madrid, are thinking about refurbishing the stadium, and clubs like Milan, Inter, and Lazio didn't do nothing about. So it would be time. And on TV, you see all that. I remember when I was going in Curva Nord, I had to go back home to watch the match to understand what was happening, because it's so far away. You don't understand when Lazio is attacking on Curva Sud. When is he shooting? Is he inside the box, midfield, close to the goalkeeper?
It's kind of like that now from the press box. It's that far away.
You don't see nothing. So it's people want to enjoy this generation, want to be entertained, feel like it's it's an event. And these days, instead, you don't understand. You go to the match because there is the fan chanting, but you don't see very well the pitch.
No. One other thing I wanted to say on the CVC thing was that I suppose that one of the reasons that I feel more kind of confident, I suppose, or hopeful that a deal could be arranged is simply the timing of it. And I don't think the timing is a coincidence whatsoever, because the one thing that will also, by the sounds of the reports anyway, be able to happen is that the immediate cash influx going into the league will get into the hands of the clubs. And obviously that would come at a time when not only are they going to be in need of immediate cash flow from the obvious effects of the coronavirus, but they're also, in arguments with Sky and with DAZN about whether or not they're going to actually receive payments for the end of the season from the TV rights deal. So on the one hand, you've kind of got, stay with the status quo and you're in a bit of financial trouble, or take the blue pill and you'll immediately be rewarded with cash and the promise of a stadium project and a nationwide stadium project. So yeah, I mean, this is why it sounds kind of too good to be true in many ways.
I don't know if it's too good to be true, but on the other side, you have to think that could change the quality of Serie A. One thing is American sports, they all have their own OTT company. NFL have NBA TV, there is MLB TV, etc. Serie A could be the first football championship to have their own OTT, and so you can get you can sell your rights directly and go directly to your client instead of selling it to IMG or etc. And this will give you much more data to understand who your client is, etc. And this will help you build a better product, hopefully. So there's a lot of things interesting about this deal, and there's a lot of money. This is really important, because one of the biggest problem of Italian football clubs is that 70% of the revenue comes from TV rights. So you have to be really careful. We know that DAZN is really struggling. Sky obviously is not going very well now. So, if that collapses, Serie A has to have a plan B. And so CVC could be really an interesting project, an interesting plan. We're going to see what happens. As I said, they have till June to find a deal. We know that MediaPro is also talking with them, has been talking with them about building a Serie A channel. Things didn't go very well that time. So we're going to see. One thing important is that DAZN and Sky doesn't want to pay the last fee of the contract, but you sign a contract, and so you are forced to pay them. If you don't, you're going to go in tribunal and you're going to be forced to pay. So on that side, I think Serie A clubs are quite safe. The only thing they could do is Sky pays and then ask for money back because they say, hey, you didn't provide the service.
Yeah, we'll have to see on that. I mean, that's one part, I suppose, of what is becoming an almost endless debate around how things are going to pan out in the rest of the Serie A season. So, I mean, I suppose this is a good opportunity to move on to that, unless you have anything else you want to add on the stadium question at all.
No, we can move to when the Serie A is going to restart, if it's going to restart, Alistair, because the impression is that Spadafora doesn't want Serie A to restart, but at the same time, he's aware that saying, guys, no football this year, would be a complete disaster for his image. So what the sport minister is saying pretty much, no, now it's not possible. We're going to see in the next weeks, etc. Every time after every meeting, the same answer. Yeah, not now, in a couple of weeks, etc. Today was the day that the clubs could restart in training in groups, and said last night, not 1 week ago, last night, they announced that it wasn't possible. So today there was the announcement that football cannot restart before the 14th of June. Before it was the 13th, but still group training has not been allowed. So Alistair, if they don't change the rules of football and you can play 1 against 1, I don't know what's going to happen.
Maybe that is what's going to happen. Yes, I mean, essentially this boils down to one thing only, which is the medical protocol, and that has been the crux all along. The German model, which allowed the Bundesliga, as I'm sure everyone knows, to restart over this past weekend, wasn't thought of as being strict enough by the government's scientific technical committee. And so the medical protocol that was first drawn up by the Italian FA was rejected. Now, where this gets really complicated was the end of last week, really, because Spadafora was in the middle of addressing the public and said that he had received the okay from Gravina, head of the Italian FA, to the government's medical protocol. But that protocol involved a 2-week quarantine for the entire squad and staff if anybody tested positive. Now, the problem there is pretty obvious. If anybody tests positive and the entire squad goes into quarantine, then that team won't be able to play for 2 weeks. They won't be able to train for 2 weeks. And essentially the entire league is, it's impossible. It's not workable. And then the day after this happens, the Serie A clubs speak up and say, that's not workable, that's not possible, we can't do that. Stating the obvious, but yeah, essentially we're back to square one again, which is trying to find a medical protocol that everybody can agree on. And the problem is now that in order for the government to actually agree to a protocol that will allow football to get restarted again, they're going to have to backtrack on the conditions they already set out. Now, my problem here, Vittorio, is, which I spoke to you about briefly before we came on tonight, is that they're now showing massive inconsistency here. It's been quite clear from the start, like you said, that Spadafora isn't very keen on Serie A restarting at all, hasn't been at any stage. But I've been out and about today with the new rules in place, the new restrictions being lifted and so on. And everybody is out right now because they've got a million reasons to be out. All the shops are open, the hairdressers are open, people are out sitting in bars, people are out sitting in cafes. Yes, everyone's trying to social distance as much as they can, but there is absolutely no hope of a zero risk. People just have to accept the risk and try and get on with their lives. Now, why is it okay for the government to say that the entire population are capable of doing that, but football within a very controlled environment isn't capable of continuing? It just doesn't make any sense anymore. At least before they can go down the trying to protect the public health line, but they've kind of lost that now because football is being treated as an entirely different case. It's very confusing.
I know, I totally agree. And there's another problem that came out last week because one of the rules of this new protocol was saying that every club has to go in the retiro pretty much for the rest of the season. And we were talking about San Paolo, but we know that Lazio has Formello, that is a huge structure with places where players can sleep. A lot of Lazio Primavera are living there. A lot of players from Lazio coming from abroad start living there and then find a place to live. But clubs like Napoli doesn't have it. So, for example, De Laurenti said last week, I cannot send the team in retiro because we have to send it to the hotel close to the training center, but the hotel is closed for the coronavirus. So we don't have any place for the retiro. So you see, even that thing was impossible to achieve. And think about Napoli, but think about Spal. Spal is even in a worse situation because they don't have the facility that Lazio or AC Milan has. So it was very difficult to achieve that. And then, as you were saying, it's not possible to have football completely safe and then the rest of the world is out and doing everything. We have to accept it. I think, unfortunately, till the vaccine comes out, that probably is going to happen next year, we have to live with it. And obviously, if the number of infected people goes down, then hospitals have more chance of dealing with this problem easily than if millions of people are affected. But the fact is this, Alistair, or Spadafora comes out and say, hey, I don't want football to restart for this reason, or he gives a date and stick with it and make the football restart. I have to tell you something. I'm not 100% happy if football restarts because it's going to be a nightmare. It's not going to be real football. And maybe Lazio is the team that has more to lose because at the moment Lazio is second, is in the Champions League race, is in the Champions League spot. Arriving second means get more money from the Champions League. If it restarts the 14th of June, it will mean play every 3 days. We know that Lazio hasn't got a deep team like Juventus and Inter, so there's the big chance that Lazio loses points. So, Lazio is a club that has a good financial situation. So if Serie A doesn't restart, Lazio won't be affected like Inter, Milan, and Roma. So I don't know. Is it? I would love to see football again, but would it be football if it restarts in half June?
Well, I mean, this is the kind of debate that's popped up over the weekend since we saw Germany restart, because it is a very different kind of contest, I suppose. I mean, without fans in the stadiums, obviously as a viewing spectacle, it's totally different and nowhere near as engaging as it is when there are fans there. But even from a competitive viewpoint, it becomes a totally different kind of contest, really. And also, they've already brought in the 5 substitutes rule, so that already is changing the game into a slightly different game. So yeah, I mean, no matter what they bring in, if football comes back, we are just going to have to accept that it is a separate entity to what the first 26 games of the season were played under. That's just where we are. But and people turn their noses up at the financial implications being pointed to over and over again, but essentially that is the main reason people are so desperate to get this back on, is that football in any form resuming is going to help football survive. And it's that simple, really. The number of clubs who are in trouble, but also the number of clubs who depend on Serie A it goes beyond Serie A. It filters down through all the leagues. It filters actually into other sports even. So yeah, I think it's important that it does restart. I think that they have to find the safest way possible of getting it to restart and try and make it happen. But it's I think that side of things we just have to accept. I think we have to accept it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same kind of thing that we were watching before we went into it. And like you say, the outcome is relatively unpredictable. The one thing I would say is that I've been listening to some of the reading the reaction to the opening weekend of the Bundesliga, and a kind of line of thought around that was that the more technical teams will be the teams that benefit more from this new football, because it's going to take players quite a long time to get back into shape. If we do get Serie A back, they're not going to be in full fitness for a while. And the teams that rely on physicality and high pressing and chasing down everyone are going to be the teams that take a bit longer to really get back into their stride. And so I think Lazio is quite a balanced team with plenty of technical players who are very confident about kind of dictating play and passing the ball around. Might actually be in a slightly better position, theoretically, to cope with kind of coronavirus football than perhaps some other teams.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe you're right. The midfield of Lazio is so skilled with that. But yeah, you never know. And then what happened the next season, because starting in June, you're going to finish in August. And then you start immediately, even because afterwards there's the European competition. So yeah, it's a little bit a nightmare. It's a big problem, but who knows what's going to happen? It's still,
The other thing worth mentioning is that UEFA have asked all their associations to tell them how they're going to finish their league by the 25th, which is a week today. So although this has been an absolute nightmare with the uncertainty around it, hopefully we will have an answer by this time next week about what's going to happen, whether that is cancelling the season, whether that's waiting to do some sort of playoffs, whether that's trying to get the whole thing underway again. We should know at least sometime soon.
I was thinking you were going to say that Scottish football is finished. The season is over.
Yeah, Scotland ended the season today. That's been coming for quite a long time, but they'd already voted to end the lower leagues quite a while ago, and it was just the top flight, the Premiership today. But again, it was kind of inevitable. It wasn't a surprise. People did kind of see it coming, but again, has already caused no end of controversy and complaining and legal threats and all the rest of it. So that is, no doubt what we can expect if the same thing happens in Italy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to happen. I mean, I can imagine a lot of teams will start complaining. So, yeah, that's one of the reasons why they should restart as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Alistair, do we have other things to talk about, or we can wrap it up here?
I think that's enough for tonight. I don't think I can talk about Spadafora for much longer, to be honest.
I don't think he's the most loved people in Italy.
No. I'd never heard the name before, and I hope after all this I don't hear it again.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Alistair, for joining me, and thanks everybody for joining us. Lazio Lounge. Remember, you can follow us on Spotify, iTunes, Spreaker. You can watch us on our YouTube channel. You can subscribe a review on iTunes. Please do 5 stars review if you love the show. And you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. And on our shop, you can find the link in the description. Good night, Alistair, and we're going to talk next week. Bye.
Cheers.